Hi everyone, and welcome to Sensory Moments. This is a podcast where we talk about all things sensory. I'm your host Shruti, and co-hosting with me is
Sandeep.
Sports Sensory's director and promoter Sandeep Buddhiraja. And today we welcome our a very special guest. She has more than 10 years of experience in human behavior, product strategy.
I'd like to add to her introduction is she's sort of a legend in consumer science, consumer technical insights. And what I've seen from outside Unilever is that the modernization of CTI of Unilever, or what is HUL, she had a large hand in that. Let's put it that way. So now, if you have a very smart consumer uh, savvy CTI guys, and that's a lot of credit goes to Supriya for that.
Oh, that's really kind of you to say. That's really kind of you, Sandeep. But yeah, I've enjoyed every bit of that journey, and I think a lot of that credit goes to the freedom that one gets within the organization that you work in, to sort of the freedom that you get to do things that are a little bit crazy, a little bit stretchy, um, to challenge the status quo. I think a lot of credit should go to the culture as well within the organization to nurture that sort of spirit.
Sure. Thank you. So, Shruti, on with you.
Supriya, you have worked in human insight and behavior science, and so like the viewers do not have any idea what it is. Can you just give like a slight introduction what exactly it and how it relates to product development and what it does?
Okay, so basically, in organizations that either have a product or a service to offer, the ultimate aim and the objective is to land that product in the hands of the consumer, and that involves um, an entire process of making the product be noticed, seen, registered, um, compared positively across, competition, a decision to pick it up, use, consume, and then form a view. And that entire process, while we as business people can plan it the way we like, it is a very human process, and it is subject to um, a lot of influence and a lot of context of where that individual comes from and what are the experiences that the individual has kind of gone through, right? Therefore, understanding of where do people come from, and therefore how are they likely to perceive a product, is something that involves understanding of the human context and the human behavior. So let me like give you an example. um, so this was really ages back. We were testing a liquid, a fabric conditioner, actually. So comfort is sort of blue in color, right? So it was a test for product test for comfort. And we had it was a blind test, so it was a blank packaging, but the bottles that we got were entirely blue in color. Yeah, so they were like a blue white combination of sorts, and they were like blank, right? And there was another test that happened in another part of the world. Same thing, same products, but we got white bottles there, right? And um, the product, when we got the test results, we saw that the results were like completely polar, like chalk and cheese. One doing really well, the other one like not doing well at all. And we checked the product. Is there a problem with the products that we sent? What happened? Did was there some administration questionnaire administration error? Data, everything we checked. What we realized was that people in one of the countries where we had used the blue bottles, ended up associating the product to something that is very sanitized, because the blue, the shade of it, reminded them of hospitals. So in their mind, the negative connotation of hospitals, undesirable, with the product was so strong that it became a complete reject. Yeah, which didn't happen in the other country. So I'm saying, understanding it is something that helps us understand why. Yeah. So understanding of the human behavior helps us understand why. People can find out the what, but the why is very, very difficult. It's complex, and it requires people to think. It requires experience. It requires expertise. So that's my example of explaining consumer research and behavior.
Thank you, Supriya. That was articulate. Thank you for telling that example. And I would like to know that uh, you come from a business background. So how did you find yourself to behavior science, or should I say, how did behavior science found you? Like, how did you get?
So no, I have always been in consumer research, for that matter. Yeah. So it is what I have done is that I have applied my knowledge of consumer understanding, or rather the passion of it, in different areas, right? It could be while working in CMI or in marketing, it was in the space of communication development, or looking at brand architecture or strategy. And when it came to CTI, it was applied in the space of product design. So I if there is an identity that I want to create for my own self in my own head, so I identify myself as primarily a consumer researcher and
Okay.
an advocate of behavior science. I have spent my first 8 years of my career in basically learning the ropes in research agencies, getting my hands dirty, making questionnaires, administering questionnaires, doing qualitative research myself. And post that, for about 18 years, I have been part of Unilever. And in Unilever, I have worked across consumer technical insights, consumer market insights, and the marketing function as well. And yeah, so different roles within Unilever. But having said that, I think who am I? And my core is consumer behavior insight, which, I mean, that's really the starting point, and I have essentially applied that knowledge and that expertise in the various functions that I have worked in. So it stretched from product design to communication development to capability build and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the section where you told about like the example. So when it comes to like behavioral science and like the principles, like how should the brand consider to design so that their product will excel? Like how should they do it so that it does well in the market?
Um, I mean, it's a very loaded question, I would say. I think uh, there is a lot that goes into product design. Yeah. Let me and every country, people people are different in different countries. Yeah, what they prefer, what they don't prefer. So understanding of the preference of the consumer and designing to cater to that preference, or to cater to that need gap, is what becomes extremely critical. Now, when you talk about product design, it is not just one product. The product has a lot of elements. To simplify, there is an inside of the product and there is an outside of the product. Yeah, let me put it that way. The inside of the product is what serves the basic need for which a product is created. Yeah. So closer home with respect to my experience, if you were to look at a detergent liquid, then the liquid per se is supposed to clean clothes, right? It's supposed to remove stains. Yeah. That is what the basic product is, right? But people don't buy basic things, right? People need a story and an experience around that little base, which I would call efficacy, the core job of the product. You create almost an aura around it to help people understand what is this product about. That aura also helps explain what is the brand about, right? So for example, I have a product and I say that I need this product to be, red in color for Lifebuoy, let's say, because it cues killing of germs. It cues power, right? It cues efficacy. Yeah. So it is a powerful product, and the red tells them that, oh my God, this is really going to be effective. Yeah. So
Right.
that's an example. The other one could be, let's take Dove, right? For Dove, it's not just the fact that it is a bathing bar which is moisturizing. How do you bring that to life? So that little outside circle is about the cues and the codes that tell people that, hey, this has got more moisturizer. How do you tell that? It's the color, the little shine the on the bathing bar. It could be the creaminess of the bar, and so many other factors that actually help tell the story that otherwise the base product would never be able to do. And sometimes these nudges or the cues that we kind of create become part of the brand identity, right? So yeah.
Okay. So, and do cognitive biases such as, like an anchoring effect or like scarcity principle, do they play any role? Like, how do they influence these products, and how can brands use these biases ethically?
Yeah, so I would say, well, do biases exist? Of course they exist. Yeah. So that's a given, right? um, I I would say, ethics is something that needs to be wired from within the organization, right? There cannot be, people find ways to justify something that is not terribly ethical as well, right? So it is something that we've discussed to no end when it comes to claims or promises that we make about the product to people, right? So when we say that a product removes 100 stains, let's say, right? Um, if you say that without really testing the product on 100 stains, because you've tested possibly 90, and then you say, hey, you know what, 90 is good enough, and I'm going to just say 100 because 100 sounds so much better,
Right.
and it is far more convincing from a consumer perspective. Let me go and do that, right? So you are actually using that bias in the consumer's mind to have that rounding off effect. Yeah, the rounding off effect is something that helps people anchor to believing that this is a good number, right? This is the right number, and you're using that, right? Is it correct? Each one to his own, really. I come from an organization where it would not be okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
If it is 100 stains, then it is 100 stains on which we will test the product, right? And you will not see the product go out without that last stain being absolutely cleared. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, you are equally competing against, players who, at many times, even local players or smaller players that don't put in that kind of rigor, but sort of um, leverage these biases for their benefit. And well, that is the world we live in, and we have to deal with it, right?
True.
True. Sandeep, would you like to ask something to Supriya?
No, I think let's talk to her background and how Sensory has or the product development has a seat on the table and things like that. You have the thing, continue.
Okay.
Means there are two examples where if you take in from an Indian scenario,
Mm-hmm.
one is obviously fog. Fog came with a great insight, but old technology. Now, if you're a technical person who understands old technology and it's a pump but consumers loved it. So you're using something because you're an insight to the behavior. We said we love value for money and we think we're wasting all this deal. And then what was years back, Ujala. Ujala was definitely not new. Aya Naya Ujala was definitely not new. It took Reckitt's years to understand as to how a very, very old technology was being shown as a new technology, and people were lapping it up because the benefits that they were getting. Whether it actually made your white color shirt white or not is not something that I'll get into here.
Yeah, I think
But
there is something about Sandeep, honest storytelling, and there is something about um, innovative and creative storytelling, right? There is nothing wrong in picking up a product that existed a long time back and creating a fresh perspective and telling a new story about it. Yeah. um, I specifically like the example of fog, and it actually brings me to the point around how the Indian consumer is actually unique, right? In from all the experience I've had working in the Indian market, the culture is that of frugality, and that's at the core of the Indian consumer. Uh, it's not that we don't see extravagance. We do see, but that comes from a very small strata of the Indian population. Most of our people, you cannot use sensory codes or cues to fool them into believing that they are buying a great product that actually doesn't work too well, right? So the deodorant example is actually one where they had a good product, and come on, it's a deodorant, talk about fragrance, talk about how it makes you feel. But no, they spoke of value for money because that respects what the Indian consumer is looking for. And it is not why, how, why would a deodorant talk about, most people would react saying, why would a deodorant want to talk about value? I mean, the Indian market, we just don't understand it. You can't do that because you can't take the Indian consumer for a ride with just a great fragrance. And that's the truth. She
true.
needs a bang for the buck, and that's part of the full deal.
Incidentally, Old Spice, which has launched a Dio only 2-3 years back in the Indian market, still not widely available, also has gone for a pump format. And I was like, P&G going for a pump format while launching Dios in India, and they obviously would be doing that worldwide. but they use the pump format because pump format works supposedly much better in India.
Yeah.
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 So they had an old technology, but it's value for money. So let's give value for money to the Indians.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry. So would you okay, let me pick this up and put Shruti out of her my uncomfortable being. So when you talk product development, when we talk sensory, when we talk these things, India has been a country where brand has been more important. Marketing has been given a lot of, if I have to use a Hindi word, tawajjo. So the entire marketing, CMI gets a lot more things than the CTIs and the thing. Things have changed in the last 10, 15 years, but I just want your experiences, your comments on where do you think it has moved? How much does it need to move compared to especially the Western world?
Okay, so yeah, the Western world. I think in the West, I find conversations on sensory to be far more active and evolved. Okay, it does not mean that sensory is not important for the Indian consumer. It is, in my view, it is more a function of the fact that a lot of published research on human behavior and sensory science has actually happened outside India. So there is a lot more material. There are a lot of references on the non-Indian consumer, which makes the application of the knowledge within the business context a little easier. Yeah, people know about it. It's done in their context and therefore easier to talk about. Yeah. What makes the 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 appreciation of sensory, vocal appreciation of sensory, yeah, in India a little difficult is also because India is a super complex market, and we cannot really generalize sensory preferences. So I very clearly remember this fragrance mapping exercise we did in India. This was again years back, where we, in all honesty, we had hoped to see, like, 2, 3 large segments, and then we had imagined ourselves saying, okay, we're going to take these segments to the business and we will brief and we will cater to these segments and be be appreciated for it. The research completely shocked us because there was so much fragmentation, so much diversity. We struggled to actually find those meaningfully sized segments, right?
True.
But the diversity in India is what makes the study of sensory preferences so much more exciting. If you knew what you were getting into, would the research be exciting? Or if you didn't know what you were getting into, it would be exciting. I think in businesses, the focus of sensory tends to be on the what. So it is, I think, limited to, how do I put it? Just running a panel. Yeah. So when I have the requirement of sensory is imagined to be limited to setting up a panel, training them, getting them to evaluate products. So it is a very evaluatory mindset. Whereas sensory science is actually, the panel is just one little part of it, right? Sensory sciences are, it is a space that actually explains the why.
True.
And I don't yet see lot of examples, a lot of instances where people are interested in the why. The what is very easy to, and the objective questionnaire, panel assessment, getting the data, being able to throw in the data to build your AI models and all that. It all sounds very, very fancy, and it's very doable, it's tangible. So the business kind of can imagine and can understand that. So that's what they're doing. Nothing wrong with that. But there is this really untapped space in sensory that is about explaining the why, which I feel is really untapped. I don't think there is a lot of conversation around it. So,
No? So, a lot of media money. So, till some years back, if you were big on media and you saw the Unilever, Cadbury ads and all, again, if you're not on TV, then you're not a big brand. And there's a lot of inventory that all these companies which have done good products, great advertising for very long, and that's going to succeed. But today, launching a product or a brand has become easier because of the e-commerce route. You can
absolutely. Absolutely, and I would say I buy products on e-commerce, and well, my experience has actually been fairly good. Some some not so good as well, but yeah, I mean, broadly it's been a great experience. So I think that's super tough competition. What it does though is um, the players that work extensively on e-commerce have the ability to change their product rapidly, right? So they are far more agile than the larger organizations. They're possibly closer to the consumer because there's really small teams. They interact with people, and they call and they talk, and there is possibly just one person or 3-4 people running that entire place. So they would pick up the phone and speak to the consumer, and so all these things happen in a tightly knit uh, place, and I think that works to their advantage, especially if you are landing products that are in the space of personalization and customization, right? So personalization and customization for large organizations is far more difficult than it is for these more agile, smaller setups, right, that are operating on e-commerce. And yeah, that splits the pie, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, going back, taking a step back, where do you think in India the sensory teams, the consumer science teams are in tune with the management on having a place on the board or a place on a table where they decide what is to be done next?
Um, I mean, when you say place at the table, I would say, I mean, which table, right? So, for example, when it comes to product design, um, sensory is pretty much center stage, right? They are center stage in creating the brand identity via the product experience, right? And in that way, uh, they have a seat at the table because the work kind of gets used. And I gave you the example of Dove and Lifebuoy, where there has been something in the sensory space that was worked upon through multiple iterations, made part of the brand identity, yeah, and it's therefore it is center stage. It is something that has a seat at the table. What I find not happening though is the conversation around it, right? One is doing the work in the background and putting it out there, and making an impact in terms of either the product or communication. But the second part of it is are you giving enough credit or to that particular stream, or is it all getting bundled up under the physical product experience, which is basically under R&D? Yeah. So is it when you get a product, you mentally don't dissect it, saying that this is in the business, right? Not the consumer. This is in the business. As a marketer, when you're looking at the product, you look at the product as a whole. You're not really dissecting it by, okay, but this is the sensory part of it, and this is the efficacy part of it. You don't do that. I'm not sure the marketers need to do it themselves. I think it is the job of the sensory experts and R&D to actually bring that to life for the business. The more you talk about it, the more people become aware of where is the success coming from. Also, I think the reason why I talked about why is important from that reason. If you test a product as a whole, you don't know where the success is coming from, right? You need to have the ability to answer the question, why is this successful, right? I'll give you another example of that one. So washing machine. So there was a stage where people in India, even if they had a washing machine, did not want to use a washing machine relevant powder in the machine. They just used the earlier hand wash powder in the machine, and that was a big thing that, behavior change that pretty much all, Unilevers and P&Gs of the world, they were really trying to make that shift happen. But so one of the things that actually ended up working was the packaging. Okay, and what was done was that if you've seen the packaging of the cardboard box for washing machine products, yeah, it is designed like a top loader, because we have more top loaders in India than front loaders. So it was like a top loader. You open the lid. When you shut it, there was a notch that gave you a little click, a soft click, which collaborated with the consumer's experience of using the top loader and shutting the lid of the top loader. So the satisfaction that you get when you put everything in and you've done, when you shut the machine, it's like, okay, now I'm off, you do your job, right? That experience was recreated with that little click. Okay, that was it is about hearing. Now you can't imagine that a laundry product would be using auditory senses to actually cue premiumness and relevance of that product for you. But that's what was done, and it worked wonderfully. When we pulled that box off in one of our tests, yeah, it just fell flat. People didn't care. So those are small instances of, where you see work on sensory actually leading to business success.
I think the behavioral science people would want to claim it from the sensory people.
Possible, yeah.
They'll say this is the little change that we did to make people's behavior different. So, yeah. So you talked about success. I think I was talking to you sometime back, and we were talking, saying we can learn a lot from failures, and especially in terms of market as complex in India, and some of the learnings that you have focus on where we failed or what we did, or somebody failed and we learned from there, and something that you can share with us.
Well, it's not exactly, I wouldn't call it a failure, but it is, because there has been a turnaround, but a very different example I would take in the space of a massively growing category of pet food. Okay. So most of the pet food introduced was in the form of kibble, the dry pet food. When people brought in fresh food, um, the experience of fresh food when you cut open the packet was that of visually of a gooey mess. Yeah, so you are pretty much squeezing out um, a gooey mess out of a pack and giving it to your pet. And that experience was not terribly appealing because, I don't know what I'm giving my pet. Yeah, it didn't matter to the pet because the pet doesn't operate with vision, the pet operates with the nose. So it was all right for the pet, but it wasn't all right for the individuals paying the money for the food. So if you see what has happened recently is that a lot of the fresh food you now see actually talks, and they've changed the way the food looks, right? By adding bits that of either the vegetable or whatever they're using. It is seen, so the ingredients can be like seen. It's not a gooey thing. Also, I think semiotically something gooey coming out of a polythene bag is not something that can be associated with anything edible.
Yeah.
So therefore, when they changed how the food looked, it suddenly started doing well. More people were open to buying even the fresh food, dog food. So I think it's one example that I've actually seen live change in the market. So
Supriya, were there any examples of the product which you thought, or like, maybe like this won't work over here in India, and it surprised you that how well it's working compared?
mm, well, we've always felt that initially we felt that liquids won't work in India, detergent liquids won't work in India, right? They won't work in India. Why? Because people would find them expensive, and they would find that the efficacy of the product to be not as great as uh, the powder, right? So that was our initial belief when liquids was being launched in India. A lot of work was done um, to compare the experience of washing with a powder and washing with a liquid. We did not exactly try to bring those experience closer to tell people that, hey, look, liquid is very close to powder, because then why buy liquid, right? But what we did was we understood the the difference in the experience, and then we created what I talked about earlier, that story around and the cues around the liquid, to make sure that the efficacy of the liquid is perceived to be good. The cues and codes are those that tell people that it is a premium product. And we kind of, the study on premiumness and the study on efficacy when it came to liquids was fairly extensive for the Indian market. And the codes are different. The codes that if you pick up a dirt is good product for India versus you pick it up in some other part of the world, you would find that the the thickness, color, fragrance, all of that, they are all it's packaged very, very differently for the Indian consumer. So yes, it is in all sense, it is a different and a very, very customized product for the Indian market.
Sorry, I had asked that experiences in other markets and what we can learn from them.
I think that the one point that I made earlier, Sandeep, on the fact that the conversations around sensory need to be more. I feel there is opportunity to do a bit more work to understand sensory in the Indian market. Formal research, right? Formal research, documented research that needs to be done, because the market is really very complex. As Sanjeev Mehta always called it, it is many Indias, right? And that is true. One has to take a call on how fragmented you want to go and how consolidated you want to, or simplified portfolio you want to keep. That's a call you can make, but you can't make that call without understanding the market, right? So I would say one thing that for the Indian market, investing in understanding sensory is super critical. Also, if we are indeed saying that the Indian market is moving more towards personalization and customization, then sensory is super important, right? I think sensory understanding is the epitome of customization and personalization. Yeah. And if we really think that's the future in India, then sensory is equally the future in India as well, isn't it?
What would you advise to people who are doing food science, who are starting their career, look at CTIs, look at consumer science? What would you advise to them? How should they follow it? What should they look for? What can they do?
Well, I would just say that do not stop at sensory testing. Do not stop at the mindset of validation. Yeah, validation is you've barely scratched the surface with validation. I'm not saying it's not important. It's super important. Yeah, but you barely scratched the surface. Understand the influence that sensory has on the brain, on the human brain, the decision-making process, and the power it has to change behavior, influence behavior. Sensory has absolutely, brilliant power to change behavior. So if you want to make a big impact with sensory, with your knowledge and expertise in sensory, then don't limit yourself to validation. Go beyond it.
So do you think they will also progress in India in the next 5-10 years in this field?
Well, I mean, progress, let's not leave progress to others, right? I think there is one approach that says, okay, the market is not ripe, so I am going to stay away from it and I shall enter when the market is ripe. Maybe it is time for us to put in the effort to change that ourselves, right? People who have realized it, people who understand sensory, who understand the power of sensory. Yeah, we have to try to make that change happen. Yeah, engage more with your stakeholders in the business. Show them the power that sensory has. Try and demand that visibility for the sensory input that was there even in the past, but didn't really get talked about. Ask for that talkability, right? To be bumped up. Um, that's how you make people see the impact. I think it's not just about creating impact, but also making people see who's contributed to the success, right? So I think both are equally important if we want to look at more investment being made and more conversations happening in India, in businesses on sensory.
Thank you so much. Any questions, Shruti?
No, that's it from me. Thank you
It was
so
a
much.
pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you, Supriya.
Great, lovely talking to both of you. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you like to know more about Sensory, please comment below. Till then, stay tuned for more episode of Sensory Moments.